Well, this is really a very critical issue. And in some sense, for me, also partially, I find it an irritating issue. And I will explain why. Very often, when we start to work with historians, coming from a very traditional school of thought, of managing memorial sites, it's the first thing they say. Oh, technology is distracting. And then you ask them, but why are you saying that? On what is that based? Then there's no answer, right? So what this illustrates to me, which I find we should really start to base our interventions on science and not on opinions. Opinions might be a first starting point to think about something, but if we build interventions, we better put some science behind it that we really know what we do. That's point one. Now, on the issue itself of distraction and attention, it turns out it's a red herring. It's just not true. On the one hand, people have agency. People don't want to use something, they don't use it. Don't force them to use it. Don't also force them to look at display items because you have a linear exhibition and you have no alternatives. So give people the choice. That's one thing. Secondly, we just have to measure what works and what doesn't work. Well, in our case, with our applications, with students and other visitors to Memorial, we measured because we don't want to impose our opinion on the world. We say, okay, let's measure this. And we measured it. And we see people appreciate it. People remember more, know more about the site than they did before. And they appreciate that knowledge and they would like to do more. They want to be active in learning more and doing more. What else do you want me to do to show you that distraction is not an issue? If you disagree with this, please come up with some data and not with just opinions. These are obstacles we don't need. Let's please have an informed, rational dialogue of how to improve education in this domain and stop floating these opinions around that are in the end based on very little. So I'm sorry, if anyone sees this as distraction, okay, let's look at the data. Let's discuss it. We will learn something. If it's an opinion, okay, then that's enough. Keep it to yourself because we have to move on. We have to build stuff that works and that is sustainable and that will work in the future when we have no more witnesses. Because that was our luxury position so far. The witness always pulled us back with whatever stupid thing we were trying because they said, no, look, I was here. I've seen it. Trust me. So this was the big recalibration we could rely on all the time. This will finish. So we better get it right very, very soon and stop building interventions that are based on opinion as opposed to science.
Thank you very much, Paul, for a very passionate answer said with conviction. I'm going to hand over to Annette.
Yeah, this is sort of in the line of what Paul said. One of our main worries were that technology would, take away the attention towards the memorial site today and the present landscape, and I do think that it very much depends on how the technology is used and also how the applications are constructed. And I think that if what seems at least to be the fact when we look at the user survey from FALSA Digital Reconstruction is that because it's sort of because you have the different layers with you have a virtual reconstruction, but at the same time it is the tablet is sort of a certain size. It's impossible to get absorbed into the technology because you are surrounded by a physical landscape. And what we learned from our user survey is that the majority of the users actually argue that they are more aware about the present landscape when using the application because they are more aware about the differences and the changes and how the world around them looks today compared to sort of the historical photographs or the digital reconstruction. And also we have several users pointing out that they're more aware of weather conditions, of how it smells, of sounds, if they hear birds or if they see leaves fall. So I do think it's very much about how how the the device is constructed, does it sort of focus on the digital reconstruction, or is it a device that actually, which has the purpose to make you aware of the different realities and forces you to engage with archive material, for example? And of course, the users of our application, they can choose not to open one single folder, but the user surveys are very clear that people are engaging with the folders, and when asked what was the most important or most interesting thing for them with the tablet application, they all mentioned the archival material and not the technology in itself. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Stephen, hand raised.
Yeah, hi, Kate. In terms of thinking about the relationship between the content that we collect on a particular site and then where that is viewed, one of the things that we try to do is be as authentic as we can about the experience at the time at which it's being created, and then to allow our users, through whichever modality they do come to that, whether at the site or in a classroom that's exploring that site, is to experience it as it was being filmed at that time. So I showed you briefly the clip of Max Eisen at Auschwitz. So he was filmed at about a dozen locations across the site during the day. And in fact, part of the iWalks is Max was interviewed in 3 countries, actually, at various sites. So what you're able to do is follow the whole trajectory of his story from his hometown through the ghetto into the camps and then finally to Ebensee, where he was liberated. And so essentially what you're able to do is create a trajectory of his story in those locations. Now, there's going to be very few users that will go to his hometown in Košice and Ebensee. So most of the time they will not be experiencing all of those experiences in the site. What we have found as well is, as was just mentioned a moment ago, that actually devices can get in the way of the experience, that you're so busy looking at the device and trying to see what was experienced there by Max, 2 years ago when he was filmed, that you're actually not experiencing it in the moment. But it does have a very valuable contribution to make long term when, for the vast majority of people, they will not travel to Auschwitz and visit that site, let alone Košice and visit the street where he was born. And so in a sense, what we're doing is we know the limitations of the technology and of the experience and the representation of that experience. And nevertheless, what it's providing is insights, which I like how Paul talked about measuring that are measurable, by which you can see, well, without that, you would not be able to get the sense of space, for example, and understand what that space means topographically. I'll just add one more thing to this, and it goes back to that issue about what's the data. When we were collecting the Dimensions in Testimony program, before we even started the first one, the question was, okay, let's just strip away all of the technological advances that we could use. Let's just say, what's the basic interaction that you might be able to have with this human being? Okay, let's make it flashcards. I'm going to ask you a question on a flashcard and I'm going to hold it up. And then the person's going to answer that, write it down and hold it back up again. And what I've got then is the content. I've got the content of the question and of the answer. No mediation by any form of technology other than the pen and paper. Then we're going to turn to a conversation. Then we'll record that conversation on audio, and then we'll record that on video, and then we'll add layers to that with additional cameras. Then we'll add a depth map. Then we'll add all. And so eventually what was happening was, instead of it being technology driven, it was driven by the content itself. It was as basic as a flashcard, but with then those layers of mediation and accessibility to that content that can then be displayed in various ways in the future. And so in a sense, we're trying to say true to the story at the heart of the experience rather than the experience driving the story.